Hi, I'm Christopher Lewin from Planet Earth, and I'm here to do this video because I feel there's a real need. It's perplexed me, it's troubled me. I've had many conversations with people who have been on a journey to seek information, who are looking for the pieces for the jigsaw puzzle. My journey is very similar, and I think I've found some pretty profound pieces to the puzzle that make sense of life here on planet Earth. Now, if you don't have an open mind, I think it's probably a really good idea that you stop watching this video now, because I'm going to be discussing some things that are outside the box. And yes, there's a number of the people who are going to continue to watch this video that are used to things outside the box. But it's just finding that there's a couple of missing pieces that have been... they just haven't been in people's consciousness. And it hasn't been able to connect the dots. Because we live in a non-linear world, and to try to find linear answers that connect this to this and that's it, it's not it. There's usually dozens of things that have to come together to make sense of it all. So that's what this video is about. So if you're still here and you're still watching, this is going to be it. I'm not going to hold back. I'm going to give you the lot as best as I know it. So, there's no hard and fast rules here, but I've come across some pretty interesting ancient information that affects the way that we think, the way that we do things today in life. And I have no doubt that this knowledge will change the way that you think and look about your life. I grew up in pretty well dysfunctional family. That's to be the truth of the matter. And so I had to find my own way through life. I got run over by a car when I was 8, put me in hospital. So I think there was some sort of conspiracy to keep me out of education so that I wouldn't look at life just as a typical Westerner. And so my journey went on through there. And anyway, by the time of 14, I was out of school and into the world, into all the experiences that you have. Back in the 70s, as some of you might remember, they were pretty wild years. So I had those experiences, and then in the 80s I went into a very religious type life. That sort of come to a completion in a sense when my youngest daughter drowned, and that changed the whole aspect of life and the meaning of life and where it went from there. That also led for me having an experience of finding myself in hospital being told that I had 2 to 3 years to live back in the year 2000 because of the grief that I was holding within my lungs. I didn't know it was the grief at the time. They told me it was pulmonary fibrosis and later changed it to a diagnosis of sarcoidosis. Well, they still said I would need a lung and heart transplant. That didn't appeal to me either. So through further research, and because I'd spent most of my life working with natural therapies, it was a bit of a shock. So it caused me to go deeper down the rabbit hole to try and find the answers. Well, the last 10 years, or I should say nearly the last 12 years now, have been a very interesting journey, and the amount of books, research, things that I've found have put some pieces to the jigsaw puzzle. So that's what I'd like to present to you. It's not like that I just woke up one day and thought I'd seek enlightenment. Unfortunately, I was one of these people that were just going along in life, and there's 2 options in life, by the way. You either actively seek enlightenment and grow, or you just live the life you're living and wait for the cricket bat or the baseball bat and come and give you a good whack to put you back on your path. I'm over the cricket bats, and I'd like to move forward, and I'd like to hope that there's not too many of them around the corner waiting for me. Now, I'm sure you can relate to some of these experiences in your life. So let's begin. There's a couple of things, and I keep saying that. And it's this is my first attempt to just sit here, talk with you, and explain it to you. So please bear with me if it's not 100% perfect. Our ratio in the things that we believe today on this planet, and you've got to understand there's like over 2,300 plus religions on the planet. And then there's all the people that have no religious beliefs whatsoever. And then there's a very small enlightened people that know what's going on. All this was set in play thousands and thousands of years ago. And what I found was that back in the Egyptian times, even probably back to the Atlantean times, there was always a group of people who knew what the truth was. And I say the truth in a very respective way, because we live in a relative universe. In other words, it's always relative to what we believe and see. But there is a truth. And this truth was so hard that if the general population knew about it, they would just totally unscramble them. So they did it in a couple of ways. They started out basically, here's your religion. They gave you that sort of model. Some people progressed above that and started to go for the inner knowing that there was a bit more to themselves. And then there was the third group that knew more than the inner knowing. And that small group have had that knowledge, and those who have kept it in truth and honesty have always wanted you to get to it, but they know that there's been steps that you have to go through to get that knowledge. So here's what it's all about. The truth is that we live inside the divine mind. Not outside of it, but inside of it. This also means, and you think, well, what does that really mean? Well, we know today that we have a physical body. We know that it's made up of energy. We know it's made up of atoms. And in fact, we are energy. And we've also found now that thought controls energy. But the question of where was the thought coming from? Who's thinking you? In fact, you're a thought. I am a thought. In fact, all of this is a thought. And so it's made of thought. We exist within inside the divine mind. Now, there's a couple of little steps involved in you becoming a thought. I'd like to discuss that a little bit further with you. But if you understand the concept of being inside the divine mind, it means you don't have to be saved. You're already there. You're all part of the divine's working, everything. Now, I might want to be a little bit clear about when I'm talking about the divine. What happened was that people had their statues, and they used to think of statues as their gods. We progressed a little bit further from that. Then we created mental gods, like the Father or the Mother. And we have mental gods, which are outside of us. And that was that concept that we're always praying to some being outside. But there could never be, if that being was outside, then I'm totally different, and there's an opposite to that. But as far as the divine is concerned, there is no opposites. And it cannot be outside it. We actually have to be inside the divine. And so therefore I can't give it a name, even the divine, or the is for that matter. It'd probably be a more correcter interpretation, because there is no opposites in the divine. We live in relativity. They're always black and white. But in the divine there can be no opposite, because if there's an opposite, then it's not the divine. And it's been the ancients taught that the divine existed in the void. Even in the Bible it says, and the earth was void and without form. In other words, it still existed. It was void without form. We were all void and without form because we existed in the divine mind that knows all things at all times, future, past, present, everything. You exist completely inside it in that one moment. So letting that go and moving through that concept, it helps you to release a lot of the religious beliefs that were imposed upon people to control them and to keep them in that pace. Now, if you also think about the sun, and the sun has many rays, yet the light is all coming from the one sun. It's the same as the divine. There is what we refer to as our higher self. It also exists outside of time and space, as the divine does. We have time and space, so we can exist. But when we were first brought forth, we were brought forth as a thought, as an ego, as an individual identity. And our quest in our journey in life is to find our way back to our higher self, because we're its original thought. So we come as an ego to create an identity. And then some religious aspect will come to us to show that there's more to life than us. And as we go down that journey and we progress, we start to look within to realise that there's a lot more to it. And then once we get that connection, then we finally go without, but still within. Very strange, because most people think that their mind is inside their body, but the truth is that your body is actually inside your mind. It is the opposite of all that we think. And the easiest way to relate to this is our dream world. When you dream, where do the buildings, the places, the people, where do they all come from? What are they made of? They're made of thought. And whose thought are they? They're your thought. And so therefore, we have a perfect working example of what a world exists with thought. This world we exist in is made of exactly the same stuff. And the ancients taught that just as we could wake up from the dream world, we could actually wake up from this world. Mind-boggling, yes. But in fact we can. And they also taught how to actually access the dream world and to go into it fully conscious, so that you can be fully conscious about the dreams that you created and the manifestations, because one world affected the other world. You spend a third of your life asleep. There's a whole different world, a whole different vibration that exists there that has quite large implications on your life. But that's what our dream world's about. And this world is just as important. I don't want to take away the importance of life in any different aspect. You're here for it. And I'm going to say too that this is one of many lives. Because you're not a body, you live in a body. And remember, your body is actually inside your mind. Just like the different dreams that you have every night. Different people, all there, but you're still the projector of it. And it's the same with this life. If we can get our head around this comprehension and start to appreciate this life for what it is and the experience we have come for, to grow, to nurture, to head to the light, and our higher self being that light. Now, we live within that thought range. Now, if you can comprehend what that means to you, you'll start to get the picture that everything is within mind. It is the opposite to what you think. I'm not saying that all these things that we see and touch and feel are not real, but we just got to understand that they're a mental construct. They are not a material construct. They're a fully mental construct. Just like your dream world is a fully mental construct. Except this is a little bit more intense. And, people will say, well, okay, I can get that about me, but what about that person over there? What are they doing? Am I thinking them? No, you're not. They are a reflection of your higher self. If you were to picture the world that we're in, like a silver screen, and so here is the divine projecting all of this, and then our higher self projects us onto the silver screen, and the interactions that take place, it all happens in thought. It all fits together. And within time and space, there's one other ingredient that's totally important to our existence, and it's called karma. And it's not karma like, if you do that, this is going to happen to you. Karma is sort of the branch that helps the cause and effect of life from one life to the next, at that flow of the river. And our higher self gives us the grace for when we get in trouble at different times and helps us through. So if you're doing it tough in life, it's because you've got your back turned to the light. You're not seeking, enlightenment. You're actually all about me, 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 me. So the selfishness will be the greatest thing to cut you off from your higher self. So if you can take that whole concept just about the spirituality and bring it into that context of who and what you are and how you fit in this universe and your journey back to your higher self and the interaction of other people, that will make a big difference on how you see life. Moving to the next level is that to understand the vehicle that we're actually travelling in, this body, how it works, how it functions, why it heals, why it doesn't heal. And that has been a long journey. In ancient times, or indigenous people had the ability to communicate with plants, and the plants would tell them what their medicinal properties were. And you've got to understand that the indigenous people didn't communicate with their head, they communicated with their heart. And unfortunately, in the Western world, we've been learned to live from up here, not here. The ancients referred to the heart as a 7-chamber oscillating, multi-layered crystalline structure. Quite a wordful. But when you start to understand how we function and how we live, and the importance of this body and its interaction and our thought patterns, because we're also thought-generating beings. Our dreams teach us that we can generate dreams and thoughts in people. And we also manifest the life that we have and surround ourselves by. Some call it the law of attraction. But it comes down to one word. One very, very, very important word. And it's called oscillation. Yes, that's right, oscillation. So if you think of a waveform moving up, that's an oscillation. The more oscillations you have, the more that's determined by, it's called a frequency, and then eventually a hertz. Our whole body is made up of oscillations, frequencies, and hertz. If you can put that into its correct perspective, you'll start to have a picture and you'll be able to understand it. Now, what is the significance of this? Well, if we go back to the early 1900s, there was a man by the name of Nikola Tesla, and he could almost claim the prize of handing us the 20th century. This man had over 1,600 patents. He was a brilliant man. He gave us AC electricity. He did microwaves, radio waves, you name he did it. Even today's military are still using his technology. This man was so brilliant that he actually went and found free energy. He actually built a tower and went 40 kilometres away from that tower, or 25 miles, stuck 200 light bulbs in the ground and they all lit up. Can you imagine if we had adopted Nikola Tesla's way of free energy today, how different that would be? He even invented a car that could just tap into the energy field, had an antenna on the back, and it would do 90 miles an hour. He drove it around for a month, and many people testified to the fact of this car. It was just a little box that he just slotted in there, and we could have been driving around today not having to use fuel. But the bankers of the day, particularly J.P. Morgan, decided to crush Tesla and destroyed all his work. Totally devastating for a man of that intelligence. But he still had the good of the people at heart, and he helped George Lavoisky to develop his multi-wave oscillator because he knew that we are energy beings and that our cells work on frequencies and oscillations. And so this particular device that they created was based on this principle, that they knew that the cell, the nucleus of the cell, was a positive charge and the cytoplasm was a negative charge, and that through that oscillation that it would reverberate through the membrane, creating the frequency which then worked, taking information in, taking information out. And we know today through the 100,000 receptor sites on the outside of the cell that they work like antennas, taking that frequencies and vibrations in. And in fact, it's working with light. And that is the real clinger of it. And so that they knew when they built this multi-wave oscillator that if they could put a wide enough range of frequencies into our body, that our body could take it up and heal. Well, George Lavoisky was very, very passionate about this. And he wrote a book called The Secrets of Life, or The Secret of Life. And in the back of that book, it's got a number of different hospitals from Paris, New York, France, that were using these multi-wave oscillators prior to the Second World War and were getting healing results. Roy Rife, another famous man back that time, had developed a microscope, could actually see the energy taking place. So it's really important that you understand that we're made up of oscillations. If you can get that point and understand how to interact with those oscillations, you're going to start to comprehend how your health works. It's really, really, really important. That information got suppressed after the Second World War. And it's no doubt the reason why it got suppressed. And this is another clinger that you need to know. That the Second World War was funded by I.G. Farben, who was a drug oil cartel. They started planning the Second World War in 1926. And there was a report that was done immediately after the war by Colonel, I can't think of his name, Bainston. Anyway, he went into the IG Farben vault, so to speak, and got all the knowledge and all the documentation showing that how they funded Hitler, and their intention was that basically as Hitler would take over the different countries, that they would get the oil and all the pharmaceutical rights and all that. It was a planned drug war. And, a number of them were hanged in the Nuremberg trials. A number of them were also given a little smack on the wrist, and 5 to 6 years later were reinstated back on the boards of the drug cartels. Interesting enough, Rothschilds claimed all the bounty of IG Farben, and with the Rockefellers, they continued on the big pharma cartel, drug cartels, which is still in effect today and suppressing us. And this is why we have the Western type medicine that we have that is based on these drugs, and the chemicals that are used in our food is a direct result of that. And if you want to do the history on that, you'll find that that is influencing and affecting the way that you live today. It is huge, and there has to come a time when it will stop. And it has to come a time when war will stop. But the only time that that's ever going to happen is when it stops in here. When we stop the war in here, the war out there will stop. So if you can understand that that's how we've been hijacked, it's really, really important. So now we understand who we are. We understand a little bit about our body, about the oscillation frequencies, and the treatments that were being given prior to the Second World War for our health. So, has any other work been done since the Second World War? Yes, it has. And there's been a number of different biofeedback energy devices that have been created. Most of them been suppressed, done under the counter, work with them. But that knowledge is there. Robert Becker is another one who has done a lot of work for understanding the body electrics. I'll give you a list of books that you can go through and do the research on. But if you can start to get a comprehension of how we actually work, it makes a big difference. So if you want to be healthy, you want to have healthy oscillating cells. For I give you an instance on how the body works, so if a bacteria or a virus gets within the cell, it has its own membrane. And that membrane breaks down, around about 40 degrees, rather than, so when you get a fever, the whole idea that the body is trying to heat the system up, so it actually breaks that membrane down so that the cell can get back into its correct oscillation. And it's the same with cancer cells. They go very prolific because the oscillation's out of whack. And Roy Rife found by putting the right frequencies in, it just wiped the cancer cells completely. There's been many cures for cancer, yet today the Western medicine will not work on you unless it's chemotherapy, radiotherapy, or surgery. That's all they've been using for the last 100 years, and that's all they're going to keep using when they can charge $6,000 for a bottle of leukemia tablets. It's big business, and they're counting on you getting sick so that you can support their industry. If you want to do that, that's fine, because they will make use of you, and they will farm you, and they are farming people today. It's time to stop the farming. It's time to stop using the chemicals in the food. It's time to get back to the way that our bodies are intended to run. So with this knowledge and understanding that we're affected by a lot of things, one other thing that's very important for you to know as well, in Lavoisi's work, they also found they did a map of Paris, and they went through and they looked at all the soil groups. Now what was really interesting was they found clay soils, alluvial soils, sandy soils, and the higher cancer rates were on the soils that weren't penetratable. In other words, as the radiation or the solar waves, cosmic waves come down, if they didn't penetrate into the earth and bounce back, they were the areas where the higher cancer rates were. Because one of the interesting things was that they found about our cell, not only for the complete electrical circuit, was that if to complete the circle, it actually needed an outside influence for that whole process. So that's why sunlight and cosmic rays are really important to us. And I think I said cosmic rays only come through over night time when the solar waves aren't penetrating us as much. So this is really important. So where you live can affect your health. And this is why Tesla was very interested in that. And 6 months before he died, he gave plans to build a device to a young fellow called Ralph Bergstresser to be able to change the molecular structure of metal, which would then receive a frequency from the central sun of our galaxy and tune to the frequency of our Earth, and then harmonize these energies. So if you're living in a place which was clay, you could live there safely and not be affected by the waves or the rays that are actually being reflected back up. Ralph went on to develop that technology by the 1970s, and he developed the purple plates. And they worked everywhere, a lot of people used them. But by the 1990s, the Schumann wave, or the resonant frequency of our Earth, started to change. Excuse me. And so there was a need for an adjusting of the technology, and that's why we have the Tesla technology we have today, which is tuned to that frequency. What in fact was actually happening was that we were completing that cycle, and we've all heard of 2012 as when time shall be no more and all those things, but what was actually happening is that we were shifting into the photon belt, and our sun was completing a 25,000 odd year cycle, and it takes 16 years to get into that photon belt, and that would be just about perfect in the 1990s when the Schumann wave or the frequencies of our Earth started to adjust. So very much on cue. We're in the right place at the right time. So that's exciting. So coming back to the information that's needed is that understanding again that we are a frequency generated thing. It's really important that we have a healthy terrain, and that goes back to the time of Louis Pasteur, when Louis Pasteur brought forth the germ theory. And there was another fellow by the name of Béchamp who had a theory that was called similar to pleomorphism, but basically said that a healthy cell can change into a bacteria, and then if the environment changes, and then it can also change into a virus, and then change into a fungus, and if the environment's changed, it can come back and change all the way back to a healthy cell. But Pasteur was promoting the germ theory, which the drug companies and the cartels much more appreciated and ran with. The interesting thing was that Pasteur on his deathbed recanted his claim to the germ theory and said that Béchamp was in fact correct. And Roy Rife also verified that whole thing because he could see that happening under his microscope. So that was some very fascinating information that, again, locked into the whole difference about our health and how important it is to have a healthy terrain. And understanding that our cells are working on oscillating frequencies, it's all vibration, it's all light. So the last thing that you really want to be doing is pouring chemicals into this body, whether they be through nutritional products, with so-called nutritional products that use synthetic ingredients, whether you're using soaps, shampoos, toothpastes, which are full of chemicals, which we apply directly to our skin. We don't want to be doing that. Or do we want to be eating foods that use chemical processes to affect them? And then we've got, of course, GM foods these days, which are totally foreign to our bodies. And they have done experiments which they keep suppressed, but they find that the mutations that happen in rats after being completely fed GM foods is just phenomenal. So, having a healthy terrain is really important. The quality of our water. Hitler was one for fluoridating the water because it controlled the masses. And we can see today that Big Pharma wants our water fluoridated so that we don't think or don't question the things that are taking place. So having a healthy terrain is really important. Be careful about what you're putting on it and what you're eating. The next step that as we go through and we start to understand our body electrics, it's really important that, oscillating frequencies are affected either way, and our biggest oscillator is our heart. And they've picked it up and they can know that it throws forth quite a large magnetic field. And just being around unhealthy people can change the oscillations within you unless you understand how your body works. And this is why healers can actually put their hand, because they take that healing frequency and they apply it to you to reset the way that the oscillations on your cells take place. And this is why biofeedback equipment, it's putting the signal back to where your cells should be. This is why I use Young Living essential oils, because they're some of the purest oils on the planet. And that oil is the song of the plant. And that song of that plant sings to our cells to bring them back into the correct oscillation. If you use the correct oil, the healing happens very rapidly. And this is why essential oils were used all the way back with the Egyptians and the pyramids in biblical times. They're very, very powerful in creating the correct oscillation with our cells. Another thing that is also very powerful is light therapy. And I use the Lumilite crystalline lenses with the sacred geometry because of the way that it interacts with our cells in helping to correct the oscillations. And we know that our DNA is made of light, and the photons interact and bring that whole into harmony. So that is why it's very important to be using modality and therapies that work. This is why homeopathy was so good, because it was so subtle, but that's all it was needed just to change the vibration within the cell. It didn't need a big cricket bat, it just needed to help the body to readjust. This is why, song is very important to us. They've found also that our bodies are a crystalline structure. It's very similar to crystal, but it's like a liquid crystal, and that our cells are like liquid crystals. And they, some of the greatest minds have worked on this and have found that this is how we actually work and how we function and how energy moves back and forth. But think about this, that the greatest structure in our body, the strongest crystal, is our bones. And we know that crystalline structures can absorb massive amounts of information. And it's my personal belief that our cellular memories are actually buried within our bones. And that is why they're so hard to release sometimes. And this is why crystal bowls, alchemy crystal bowls or sound therapy is so good, because it gets the bones to actually vibrate, that it starts that release process. And if you use the right essential oils and you use light therapy at the same time and in the right intentions, you can actually erase those thought patterns or those pictures that are actually encoded on us. And I really believe that is the way for moving us through the programming that's being put within us. Moving on from there, just getting the body electrics right is then also the thought process, and we have been taught to think that we think with our head. But in fact, the real perception organ is our heart. And we have to learn to get out of our head, to come back into our hearts, to learn to feel, to communicate, and to take the war out of our lives, get rid of the anger, get rid of the hate, all those things, and come back from a place of love. And that's when your life's going to change. Learn to feel again with your heart. You've forgotten how to do it because the Western world has taught you to make it's all logical. It's not. This is the second part. And we know through history now that how important the heart is. You think about people who've had heart transplants. They take the personality of the previous owner of that heart. And there's many documented cases for that. I encourage you to look at that. But our heart thinks. And the other thing that was really relevant and important to me was that, we often think of the heart as just a pump. It's more than just a pump. And I'll tell you why. Because our blood travels around our body every 60 seconds, right? It's like the equivalent of going around the world twice. That's the distance it's covered. Now, to have a pump to push it all that way would be incredible. And our heart can't pump that far. The right chamber can only pump a foot, and the left chamber pumps 11 foot. If you wanted to get something to pump all the way around the body, you'd have to take a big boulder and be able to shoot it a mile in the air. It doesn't work. Our heart is not just a pump. It's many other things. And what they found because of this is that the life is in the blood. The blood has its own life. In fact, it moves as a vortex through our body. And that's so fascinating, that the blood has its own capacity to move. Very, very interesting. It's just like when we look at our planet, we thought that the planets were all going around the sun like that. But, the sun's moving at 11 million miles a day. And it's a vortex that's creating, and we're all sort of like a corkscrew just following it through. where you were yesterday was 11 million miles away. But in fact, if you look at the speed of our galaxy, which is travelling at 45.6 million miles a day, yesterday was a long way away. And, even though yesterday's a thought, today's a thought, tomorrow's a thought, yes, it's all made of thought, but just a little bit of relativity within all of that. It's quite interesting. So anyway, moving on to this incredible body we live. And so the magnetism and the energy and the light that control it. Yes, the heart's in connection with the blood wherever it is in the body, but it doesn't pump it all the way through. It actually is an organ of perception. How many times, they broke my heart, I feel with my heart, let's have a heartfelt. There's so many different languaging, relating to our heart. If we could just only get back into it. That's how the ancients communicated, as I said, with the plants, with their heart. And so to start that journey, we had to come back and realise the significance of thought's control on energy. And this is why when you can have someone who's got multiple personality disorder, who has brown eyes, and yet they change their personality and 90 seconds later they can have blue eyes, how does that happen? How does it happen when a person's been given an incurable disease and here they are 6 years later? Because they changed their thought, the way that they see their life. And thought has an incredible aspect. And it's understanding how those thoughts got there. And that's why I started this talk with about, where have they programmed it from? What spiritual beliefs have you been given? And I want to say, it's okay wherever you are. I'm not here to change what you're believing at the moment, but understand that it's a journey and it will continue on, and don't get stuck in one spot. But it's all about growth, heading back to the light. So here we are with the thought process, and there's just been so many. Emoto was another great one who's showing that our thoughts affect the crystalline structure of water, and we're mainly made up of water. So there's plenty of evidence for a thought-based being. And again, I relate back to our dream world, how we create that world with our thought. So that is certainly investigating, and it's really important what you're thinking, because it'll keep your life within that energy phase. It'll keep you vibrating at that phase. So your thought patterns are so important as to what dictates your life. And as many times as said, if you want to see what your life is like, look at the people that are around you, because you've generally attracted them. So it is important, and if you're looking for ways to change that vibration, and remember we talked about those memories being stuck within our bones and within our organs, we need to use methods to release them. And that's why I use the Young Living essential oils and the crystalline lights and different biofeedback techniques, anything that's going to help to change that vibration. But it's really important that I have the correct thought patterns that are going to work for me for that to happen. And it's important for you as well. And so, again, we just relate that a little bit further, that with your thought patterns, they can be dominated by your spiritual beliefs. And it's really important that you understand that aspect, that you are in fact a thought, I'm a thought, and we are the thoughts of our higher self. And that all religions taught surrender, because ultimately we're taught to surrender our way, our lives back to our higher self, so it can live through us and we can live that life which is far, far more fulfilling. And the only way that you'll connect with your higher self is not through your head, it's through your heart. So again, we come back to the heart. This seems like the whole important place in our life. There's so many people who die of heart attacks, so got nothing wrong with their heart. I think it's to the point where they're just not listening anymore, and there's nothing more they can do in this life, so out you go. Try again next life. So that's just some of the things that I'd like to talk about. Some of the equipment that I love using is the Heart Quest, because I can actually look at the fractal dynamics of the heart, of the nervous system, and see how this is all balanced together. I want to encourage you to explore, go out there, use whatever suits you. You'll see on my website here, I do the things that I believe in. But it is a very interesting relative universe that we live in. And I just want to encourage you to embrace life because you've been given a life. Yes, you may have made some decisions that ain't that good. I've done it. And yes, they affect us. But I do know, through the grace of our higher selves, that we can ask for, that we can change the flow of the river. Yes, we can change the flow of the river and move our lives forward. Yeah, I know, I've talked to people about face profiling, yes, and we have certain traits that we've come into this life with. There's certain lessons we're here to live. We can't escape certain fate. But destiny we have choice over. We have the choice of how we get to those fate points in our lives. Well, I just wanted to get some of this down. I know it's just a small part of it. I'd love to go into all the ins and the outs and all the wonderful things. But I hope that just some of this knowledge will touch your life in some way to help you make better choices about the way that you live and the reason why you do things. What sort of therapies, how you eat, how you live, the relationship you have with other people, how you feel about it. Are you truly interested about what other people think? If you're not, look at what you're thinking and why don't you have any compassion for those other people? This universe is based on love, and it really is. There's a whole lot of love there. And yes, there's the opposite darkness. And, just think about that, If we're all inside the divine mind, that means evil exists inside the divine mind as well as love. And it's there for this dimension for a good reason, but I can't go into that long discussion at the moment. But what I'm saying is that you have the choice to have the good life or the bad life. And no matter how bad your life has been, or what terrible choices you've made, or what impact that you've had on other people, you can change that today by choosing to go a different direction. You have an incredible being. You're loved by your higher self, otherwise you wouldn't have been thought of in the first place. And once you start to understand that whole connection of this being a thought, mental universe, you can have a little bit more understanding. And I'll just touch on it for one thing before I go. When you die, you leave this body. You as a thought do not vanish or disappear. You change your existence back into a dreamlike state. Now, depending on what type of life you have lived, will depending what type of dream state that you go into after you leave this life. So if you've been an arsehole, you're going to go into a dreamlike state and you'll relive that, and you've actually created your own hell. And they say that there's 3 variations of that, and on the other side there's 3 variations for those who lived a good life. So you actually create your own heaven, because it is a dreamlike state where the review process goes place, prepares you for that next aspect, the next life that you're going to live. And there's also a middle door that you can go through. If you've lived a blank life, really haven't achieved nothing, done nothing, you basically jump out of the river and hop back in the river the other side, and it's like you weren't even here. So that's some aspect. And there is that 8th opportunity for those who have sought enlightenment and found the 4th state of consciousness. They can actually, as I said, you can actually wake up from this life, and if you get to that point, you can choose when you die, or just before you die, whether you want to come back to this dimension, go to a higher dimension, or be reabsorbed into your higher self. They are the choices. And this has been known about for a long, long time. This is nothing new. And so I just want to say, hey, we have a wonderful life. And if you can understand life, you can understand death. And if you can understand death, you can understand life. Our whole universe is made up of a revolving doors, of planets being destroyed, planets dying, planets being born. This is life. Enjoy it and embrace it. So you're here for this moment in time. What do you intend to do with it? Where do you want to take it? I encourage you to make the most of it, to love as much as you can, to feel as much as you can, connect back with your heart and be one with it once and for all. So thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the website, and I hope this blesses you, I really do, because this knowledge has completely blessed me. It's helped me to live with many aspects, understanding my daughter's death, the sicknesses in my life, to get well, my relationship with other people, seeing how people's lives work. It's just totally, totally fascinating. I love life, and I love the places I go, and I know there's people out there who are struggling, who just can't put it together. But I know if they can just take a little bit of this information and take the time to understand it and go for it, it will put so much more meaning into your life. And you won't be so dominated by particular belief structures, which you can let go and move forward. This is a wonderful life. Enjoy it. I love you. Thank you for taking the time to watch it. Bye for now.